Hello everybody, and thank you for joining today's Bringing Museums to the Home workshop session. I think this is session 7, and today's topic is Creative Commons and Wikipedia. For those that have just joined the workshop programme for the first time today, my name's Anne-Marie Reid. I work with Highlands and Islands Enterprise, and I currently project manage HI's involvement in the Capito Interreg North Sea Region project. And I'll just provide a note just of the Capito website for those of you who are interested in finding out more about the Capito project. So the website address is northsearegion.eu/Capito, and Capito is spelt Cupido, and the website address is also referenced on the Expo North website. So and again, for those that have just joined today, it's through the Capito project that Highlands and Islands Enterprise have been able to partner with St Andrews University to deliver a programme of digital heritage activities across the Highlands and Islands region. And this programme of workshops bringing museums to the home is part of the Capito project. So I will now pass you over just to our colleagues at St Andrews University, to Professor Alan Miller and Catherine Ann Cassidy, who will facilitate today's workshop session. As I mentioned, the session is on Creative Commons and Wikipedia. And the session today will provide a roadmap for licensing digital representations of heritage, and it aims to demystify the licenses, the intellectual property and other terms. And it will also look at providing templates and an acknowledgement guide as well. So I hope you find this session useful, and I hope you enjoy. And yes, thank you again for joining. Thank you.
Hello everybody, thank you very much for coming to this seminar on Creative Commons and Wikipedia and the like. And I think this is a really, I can understand that we're kind of veering into the issues to do with the law and legality and all of that sort of thing. But I do think that this is a really interesting topic, and also one that can be very important for projects and for development, but for heritage in general. And I think one of the reasons why it is we just need to think a little bit about why it is important. Is if we think a little bit about the difference between the physical domain and the virtual domain, or you could describe it as the difference between the analog domain and the digital domain. And so I want to just briefly touch on that. This refers back to a video from the last session about Google Plastic, which really just plays upon the idea that in the real world we get full immersion. In the real world we get 20/20 vision, we can hear well, we can smell, there's at a high level of accuracy, and in reality on the digital domain we can only ever approximate to that. So when we're digitizing something, we take measurements, but every measurement that we take has this thing called quantization. So it's an approximation. There's a rounding that takes place, so we're going to lose some accuracy as we go along, and we reduce everything down to zeros and ones. Once we got everything as zeros and ones, this means that we can then recreate the sort of analog thing. So in this case, this is sound, recreating a sound wave that we can play back. But in the process, we've made no, I didn't mean to play that, but there we go. I don't know if you heard it even, because I didn't think I switched on the sound for the video. So the point being that in the digital domain, things are easy to copy, they're easy to move, and they're easy to change, and they're easy to and these can be seen as positive things. These are normally seen as positive things. It means that lots more people can see the heritage that we're wanting them to see. But it poses questions. Right? It poses questions. So who has ownership of this thing that can be copied so easily? How do we control? Do we want to control? If we do want to control, how do we control who has access? Who has access to it? So when we move something from the physical domain into the digital domain, things change with respect to intellectual property. You know, if you digitize a monument, that monument is kind of in the public domain. Anybody can go up and see it, and you know, and all of that. But if you digitize it, you make a 3D model of it, or you take a photograph of it, you create a digital asset, which may have value. And so issues to do with intellectual property start to arise where they hadn't arisen previously. And so for that reason, when we're talking about digital projects to do with digital heritage, we have to have some understanding of what are the issues to do with intellectual property. So for that, I'll just kind of go through intellectual property, IP. It refers to creations of the mind, like an invention, a play, a design, a drawing, a recording, any of these things. So things that we have applied our minds to and done something creative to bring into existence. Intellectual property can and does apply to these things. And there's three main instruments that we can use to protect intellectual property. So one is patents, second is trademarks, and the third is copyright. So a patent, that's a thingy, Alexander Bell's notebook, the guy who was inventing the telephone. So a patent for an invention is granted by government so that the person stroke organization who invented it can gain recompense for the time and energy that they invested and creativity that they invested into creating the thing, but usually for a limited period of time. So patents. And that's the thing that can make drugs so expensive and so inaccessible. So there's lots of issues around patents that can be thought about and brought up. But nonetheless, that's what a patent is. A trademark, you know, about badges of origin. They tell you where something came from, and they're part of the sort of marketing thing. So this might be words, slogans, logos, shapes, colors, sounds, those sorts of things. And if you're good at creating logos and stuff, then you've got a very marketable skill. So trademark. Now copyright. So this is from the Oxford English Dictionary. The exclusive and assignable legal right given to the originator for a fixed number of years to print, publish, perform, film or record literary, artistic or musical material. And the definition is really broad, but when we're talking about heritage and digital heritage, we're not mainly talking about trademarks, or we are talking mainly about copyright. So this is the area of intellectual property that is of interest and that we should focus on. And so we will ask the question, what does copyright apply to? So the definition is quite broad. So it's any literary and artistic work. So, you know, the creation of ornaments, the design of furniture could be included in that. The making drawings, making swords that have got embellishments on them, and all of those sort of things. So there's a list here books, lectures, dramatic, choreographic works, translations, collections of literary or artistic work. So quite a lot of the things that we see in museums potentially fall within this category. So copyright is something that is of interest. So ownership and transfer. So this is a thing to understand. The owner of copyright is the creator of the work. Okay, and this is something that happens. It just happens when you create something, you get the copyright for it. You don't have to fill in a form. You don't have to do an application. You don't have to send off a letter. You don't even have to know that you have the copyright for it. It's just, if you've created something, then you automatically get that copyright, unless something else has happened. So if you fill in a form which signs that away, then maybe you don't have the copyright. Maybe the copyright accrues directly to, for example, I work for University of St Andrews, and anything that I do, University of St Andrews claims the copyright for. But there's a sort of an agreement that, you know, if they make millions of pounds from it, then some of it will come. Then some of it will come my way, and that the university has to do its best to exploit intellectual property that I create. So there's an agreement, but essentially the intellectual property goes to the university, and that should happen a lot, actually. You know, like if a museum employs somebody to come around and take photographs, then they should sign something which says that the museum gets a copyright for the photographs. Because if they don't, then the museum is employing somebody to take photographs, but they don't own the photographs. The person who took the photographs owns them. So it's an important thing to be aware of. But once somebody has copyright, then it can be transferred. It can be transferred across. And the Berne Convention of 1886 is the place which kind of established that copyright, the basics of copyright law, and also an agreement that everyone who signs up to the convention is going to kind of play by the rules. So that means that although we have different jurisdictions in different countries and different rules regarding copyright and intellectual property in different countries, they're kind of all working in the same ballpark. Okay, so you may need to look at if you're interested in the international situation, you may have to look into the details, but effectively we're working in the same ballpark. In 1996, the WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, which is a good place to look for resources and information about intellectual property. It's a treaty in 1996, and what this treaty says essentially is all the stuff we talked about in Berne, that applies in the digital world, and it will apply for using the internet and transferring things in those ways. Intellectual property and copyright applies within those contexts. Okay, so as the internet was expanding, intellectual property copyright rules got updated about it. But there's some things that we need to consider, particularly in the heritage sector, because in the heritage sector, we deal with old things. We deal with things that have been around for a long period of time. And copyright doesn't last forever. So the duration of copyright begins from the moment the work is created. This can be slightly different in different countries. Under some national laws, when it is fixed in tangible form. So copyright protection continues until a certain time after the death of the author, which can be 50 to 70 years. So, you know, if you're talking about something that's happened 30 years ago, it's probably under copyright. If you're talking about something that was written 100 years ago or 200 years ago, or not just written, created, made, then there's no copyright on it. And this means that intellectual property just simply doesn't apply. It doesn't enter into the equation for those things. And so though they are now in the public domain, they're no longer subject to protection under copyright. Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, they're like a museum, somebody may own them, or they may exist in a museum, which can then control access to them, okay, but the control that they exercise, or control that is exercised over them, deciding what exhibits to put them in, what not to put them in, where, all of that stuff is to do with ownership. It's not to do with copyright law. It's not to do with intellectual property, which doesn't apply in that context. So lots of old stuff, just it doesn't apply. So I mentioned the public domain. So what is the public domain? And the public domain is everything which is not in copyright, okay? And we can put things into the public domain. So they may go into the public domain because the copyright has expired. They may go into the public domain because I've said, I've had a really great idea and I've written it down and it's fixed. I've now got the intellectual property for it, but I want to put this idea into the public domain so anybody can do what they want for it. So I create a virus, I create a vaccine for COVID-19. I can put that into the public domain so everybody, anywhere in the world can, you know, manufacture it and pass it on at cost so everybody can get vaccinated. Or I've taken a photograph. I think it's a really great photograph. I'll upload it to a repository and I'll put a public domain mark on it. And this will mean that anybody can use it for whatever purpose they might want to use it. Or it may not be applicable. So for example, there is a classic example of, I think it was the British, anyway, it was a museum or library, lots of old paintings, took lots of photographs of the paintings, put them onto the web, put lots of safeguards in to make sure that people couldn't just copy them and put them somewhere else. But some hacker went in and did a script which downloaded all the different bits, stitched them all back together, and then uploaded them to a public forum. And this ended up in court, and the point about it is that the court decided that no infringement had taken place because the paintings were all old in the first place, so no intellectual property applied to the paintings. And also the act of taking a photograph of a painting wasn't considered to be a creative act in and of itself. And because it wasn't a creative act, there was no intellectual property created through taking the photograph. And so there was no intellectual property protection. So when you put them onto the web, you could put a marker saying this is copyrighted and nobody can do what they want with it. But when tested in a court of law, it was found not to be true, and so people could do whatever they wanted with the images of those photographs. So that's an interesting example. But more positively, lots of people have decided to put things into the public domain. And what this means for us is that there are lots of digital resources that are out there that we are entitled to find and to use in the creation of digital outputs, whether it be exhibits, exhibitions, web pages, Facebook pages, all of those sorts of things. There's lots of resources that are there. And this is just a list of some of the places that we can go. So probably the best place is Wikimedia Commons, and there's a link there. Please move this. Okay. Wikimedia Commons. So images, sound and video, but we can go to the British Library. They've got released millions, literally, of images. The Smithsonian Institute, but also recently Sketchfab has done a public domain thing, so we can download 3D models from Sketchfab, and also YouTube. There are lots of YouTubes that are under Creative Commons licenses, and we'll look at the difference between Creative Commons and public domain in a little while. So there is a big and rich and growing public domain of digital resources, a lot of which are relevant to heritage, that we can benefit from, and kind of by reverse, by contributing to that can also help other people and help ourselves. I just put this slide in. This isn't strictly Creative Commons or public domain, but there's lots of open source resources as well. And this is a list of very solid, very good, open source, freely available pieces of software, each of which is available on Windows, Linux, and Mac platforms. And so, GIMP is an image manipulation for photographs. Audacity is good for sound. People are asking about, well, how do I put images, and what software can I use for putting images together with sound and make them into little short movies? Well, Avid Mux would be a good choice for that. I'm sure there are others that have more flash about them, but one of the good things about Avid Mux is that it really kind of keeps it simple, so you can get the basics done, and then when you have like control over that, you can then sort of move on. Blender does everything. There's a steep learning curve on it, but once you've got it, you're well on the way, and it has more complex non-linear video editing and modeling. So there's a whole range of different software that are there, and we'll next week we'll make some recommendations as well about the modeling side of things and the virtual museum side of things. But that's a list of 7 pieces of software. And when I set up a new computer for myself, one of the first things that I do will be to install this software on these. And because most of them haven't got bells and whistles, they will actually run well on computers that aren't Flash. I mean, maybe MeshLab and Visual FSM, a bit of an exception to that, but the others you'll get the best out of your computer as well. I was just installing a lot on them on a laptop I've been resuscitating that dates back to 2008. So yeah, they're tested to work on a lot of different platforms. And then in terms of digital resources, now not all of these are public domain, but some of them are. And you probably know about most of them. Canmore is great. It's got lots of heritage sites, lots of information. Whenever we're doing a project about a place, Canmore will be one of the first stops of call. National Library of Scotland, similarly, loads of images, maps, and docs. Europeana is worth a look. They're the sort of European Union's heritage kind of virtual museum repository. And there's a lot of resources that are there, including 3D models, including photographs that can be downused and reused. They've got a wide ranging licensing structure, so they have a lot of open source, a lot of Creative Commons stuff there, UNESCO, and the like. So they're all there. Public domain makes it freely available, but for people to use. So there's not a legal impediment. You can do what you want. But this is kind of Europeana's public domain usage guidelines. So this is kind of like how you're polite, how you behave yourself, what you should be doing. So you should give credit where credit is due. You should protect the reputation of creators and providers. Don't take a piece of work and wreck it and then push it up and attribute it to somebody else. Show respect for the original work, show respect for the creator, share knowledge, be culturally aware, preserve public domain marks. So if you get something with public domain on it and you do something to it and decide to publish it, then keep the public domain mark on it. Don't kid on that you've just kind of like made it yourself and so on. So yeah, and generally, be constructive and support efforts to enrich the public domain. If you're taking stuff out and making use of it, then think about how you can add stuff back in again. So this is all guide. It's based upon goodwill. It's not a legal contract, but I think it's a good way to go forward. And I think in general, when we're talking about intellectual property, and we're talking about digital resources and museums and heritage. If an organisation has digital resources that they're wanting to make available to the public in some way, or an individual, actually just making a statement about how you want them to be used may well be a good idea, even if it doesn't have the force of law. But if you're clear about resources that you're making available, what you feel comfortable with people doing with them and what you don't, then that's a good, I think that's a good thing to do. I do computer science, so I like diagrams. And this just makes, this just kind of makes it look a bit more complicated than it should be. But you can just follow this route map and that will tell you what sort of license you need by answering a bunch of simple questions. Each question is simple, it's just there's a lot of questions on there, which makes it look complicated. So, do you love something? Yeah, I love it. Did you make it? No. Okay, so then is it in the public domain? Blah. I love something. Did you make it? Yes, I did make it. So you hold a copyright on your work. Others have been to adopt, adapt and redistribute it. So that happens automatically. Do you want to permit others to adopt, adapt? If yes, then move to the next thing. So is it art, music, 3D, print, writing or scholarly work? If yes, was attribution, what attribution do you want? Do you want to have attribution? No, you can do CC0. Do you want attribution? Then you have a different license, CC, Creative Commons, and so on. So you can answer these questions. You can think about anything that you've got and follow these questions through, and that will tell you what sort of license you want. The great thing about licensing and heritage is that you don't have to write a license. We never have to write a license. There are enough licenses out there for us to simply simply choose the license that we want. But it is often a good idea to put a license on. Apart from anything else, it makes it clear that you're the person who should be putting the license on rather than somebody else making a claim to it. So licensing is something that is featured with the COVID situation. So the Creative Commons, who I'm just about to talk about, have done this open COVID pledge. So it's a pledge to make intellectual property available free of charge. We're working towards a solution, and underneath are some of the organizations that signed up to that pledge. So saying cooperation is the way forward for trying to overcome the COVID problems. So Creative Commons, here we have it. So the idea with Creative Commons is to provide licenses that will enable the work that has been done to be shared and to be used and to help essentially make society better, help us move forward. And there's 4 questions, there's 4 things. Attribution, non-commercial, no derivatives, and share alike. And when deciding what sort of Creative Commons license you would like to apply to something, you just have to think about those 4 questions. And as a consequence of that, the license that you want kind of just falls out from that. So attribution, when somebody uses the thing that you created, do you want them to say that it was you that made it, or are you not bothered? There may be reasons why you're not bothered. I mean, so for example, newspapers and the like, you may get more exposure if you don't insist on attribution than if you do insist on attribution. But even if you don't say you don't want to insist on attribution, I put it into the license, you can still say that you'd like to get attribution where possible or where appropriate. So do you want attribution to take place or not? Non-commercial. Okay, so non-commercial means that if other people cannot use your work commercially if you put a non-commercial license on it. If you don't, it means that they can use your work they can use your work commercially. A lot of people really feel uneasy about not applying a non-commercial clause to the license. The thing that I would say there is that, if you're giving it away, which you are if it's Creative Commons, it may be that there's not that much mileage in anybody commercially exploiting it, because everybody can always go back and get it from you in any case for free. And the other thing is that can be quite strict, so for example, it can be considered that putting something on Facebook is commercial, and so do you really want to be saying to people, yeah, you can have this, but you can't put it on Facebook? And maybe you want people to be able to do that. So sometimes the answer to that question isn't as obvious as perhaps it could be. No derivatives or derivatives. So that means that, okay, you give this thing to somebody. No derivatives means they can't change it. Okay, they can't, like, I don't know, edit the painting, use it as part of a larger scheme, contributing to something else, or any of those sort of things. They can just use it as you gave it to them and do nothing else. Nothing else to it. And derivatives allows people to do whatever they want to do. And then share alike. Others can remix, tweak, and build upon your work as long as they license their new creations under the identical terms. And this is quite a strong thing, and it's something that, I mean, the combination of attribution and share alike actually gives quite strong protection against exploitation, and enables it to go out quite widely without fudging rules with social media and the like. So share alike is a good thing to do. And then depending upon which things you've ticked on there, you get your license. So, and that, they come with a nice little logo which tells you what the license is. So CC BY is Creative Commons by attribution, and so on. And these are just graphs of the different sorts of things, different sorts of licenses, and how they kind of relate to each other. And there's this kind of division between free culture licenses and not free culture licenses. And free culture licenses are ones that are in the public domain, they're by attribution, or they're by attribution and share alike. So that means that they're free culture, they're free in the sense of freedom, in that people can use them how they want to use them. And 58% allow commercial use and 76% allow remixing. So it's quite fun deciding what sort of license you want to put on your thing. YouTube have Creative Commons option. So when you put something up on YouTube, you can say, I want this to be Creative Commons. So it'll be Creative Commons by attribution, and that means people can download it, use your video, remix it with other stuff, put it out, but they have to say that it came from you. YouTube itself has a license that you have to agree to, as do pretty much all social media things, which essentially says when you're uploading this, we're allowed to do what we want with it. And I'm not sure that they would act on that, but it covers them for pretty much anything that they want to do with the stuff that you upload. You can do. I think people get more upset about the licenses that social medias have than what they actually do to it. I often hear people say, oh, I don't like the license that such and such a platform makes me sign. But I very seldom hear somebody say, oh, but I uploaded a photograph and you know what, they made millions of pounds on it and they never gave me a penny. So I think that's just worth bearing in mind with that. And remember, the license that the social media platform takes isn't the one that they pass on to other people. So here you've got YouTube saying, yeah, there's a Creative Commons license. Anybody can download it. That's what they're going to have. And here's a separate license that we'll have. So, and this is an important point. Any piece of thing that qualifies for intellectual property creation, you're not limited to one license only. You can give different people and different entities different licenses depending upon what you feel is appropriate, if you want to do so. So you can, when you kind of do the transaction, hand over the stuff, you can agree the license, and that doesn't have to be the same license that you agreed with the last person that you gave the video to. And these are the licenses. So you get the little logo. This is a license for attribution. So the thing on the left, Attribution for International, is a summary of the license, which tells you what it's all about. And then the thing on the right, Creative Commons Attribution International Public License, is the actual license. And so there's more text there. And that's the legal document that you're applying to it. So assuming that, you know, we found an image, we love the image, we want to put the image into our PowerPoint or into a video or use it in an exhibition, how should the attribution work? And essentially we should do this. We should give the title for the work. We should say who the author is for the work. We should say where the original work can be located or downloaded, so we can go back to the original. We should say what the license is, and we should say where the digital source and physical source are. Sorry, I've already said that. So this is an example. It's an ideal attribution. Creative Commons 10th birthday celebration in San Francisco by TVO. It is licensed under CC BY 2. And each of those blue things are links. So that will, the first link will take us to the source. The second link will take us to the person, you know, their web page or something. And the third link will take us to the license. And so that is what an attribution should look like. Often they don't look like that, but it is nice when they, it is nice when they do. It is nice to, you know, not just say who it's by, but give a link to the license. I think actually, if you don't give a link to the license, you're breaking the license agreement. So even if you've got a Creative Commons license associated with it, you kind of need to put that into the document, or in some way make it accessible for you to be still on the right side of the law. And whew, there you go. There's a table which tells you about all of the different licenses and how they relate to us. Software comes under the same sort of thing. So GPL license so that's GNU General Public License, is a nice free license for software. That a lot of the software that I pointed to you at the front will come under this license, in the sense that it's open source and people can modify it, and they can then go on and sell the modifications that they've made. So that keeps it really quite open. And if you're interested in that side of things, then there's a couple of links to get you off. Richard Stallman is the man in this subject. So then hopefully that's like an overview of copyright, and I've talked about heritage within that context. So who owns heritage? Heritage and copyright, who owns heritage? Well, often nobody does, you know, and if people do, then it doesn't necessarily, you know, they could still be in the public domain. So this is a photograph of Rate Castle. So intellectual property doesn't apply because it's too old for that. Anything intellectual property will have expired on it. But if we create a digital representation of it, then the intellectual property questions start to come back. So often copyright is not a great tool for protecting heritage. Often codes of conduct or coming to agreements are better and more flexible. So if we could think about different cases, photograph of a painting, I mentioned that before, a digital model of an Iron Age boat. I'm not sure what the answer to that is with photogrammetry, because the photographs things has been tested in law, but with photogrammetry, you're creating a model. So is that creative? I mean, on one level it is, because there's a whole level of processes that you need to go through in order to make it. On another level, you're just trying to make it as close a representation to the original thing as before. I think that intellectual property probably accrues to the person who makes a 3D model, but like I say, I'm not sure that that's been tested in law, and we live in a society where innocent until proven guilty. So until a court actually goes, oh, that 3D model that you're using, you never had permission, and intellectual property, you broke intellectual property, and so we're going to find you guilty and punish you in some way. Until that happens, it's very hard to say with any certainty what the thing is, and also it's hard, maybe a different judge on a different morning would come to a different solution. Recording of a singer, the person who does the recording. A selfie taken by a friend, the person who presses the button, the friend, it accrues to. A video of a museum made by a video company, the video company get the intellectual property, unless they've signed a contract which says that it goes elsewhere, or come to an agreement. So a Heritage Lottery Fund, or a National Lottery Heritage Fund as it's called now, is keen on heritage Creative Commons for their digital outputs. So our default position is that you should use this license, Attribution Non-Commercial 3, Unported CC by NC 3. Presumably it's now 4 because time has moved on. But they're not, they will have a conversation if you want to use a different license. The European Union, big fan of public domain in theory anyway. The Europeana has a lot of online resources, and one of the things that they have, which is great, is this list of available rights statements. So they use and encourage use of the Creative Commons licenses and of the public domain licenses, but also have available other licenses. So in copyright licenses, education use permitted, in copyright, or copyright not evaluated, and just in copyright. So an orphan work means there may be copyright, but we don't know who has it or who owns it. So I can't think of a situation where one of those 14 licenses wouldn't cover. And that link there, Pro Europeana, available rights statements, will take you off to more detailed of what those 14 things are. And finally, often this traditional knowledge in intellectual property and crafts and intellectual property is something that the WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, is working with. And this statement, I think, kind of sums it up. The current international system for intellectual property was fashioned during the age of enlightenment, industrialization, etc. In recent years, indigenous people, local communities and governments have demanded equivalent protection for traditional knowledge. So this would include craft and a range of different things, and has this notion of collective intellectual property. So it's an issue. Current intellectual property doesn't cover it. The World Intellectual Property Organization is trying to come up with a formula that will cover it, but haven't done so as yet. But so it's something to be kind of aware with. And that really is what I kind of really wanted to say about intellectual property. So now you get the exciting bit where Catherine's going to talk a bit about Wikipedia.
Yeah, because it rolls in, it kind of like ties in with the Creative Commons a little bit with what it can cover, but also that you know, if you're trying to put things out into the public domain, Wikipedia is a good place to do that. Whether it's just, you know, it's not necessarily just media or content. It can be information as well. So I think that's why we kind of rolled it up together in this presentation. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of what it is and what you can do with it that will help your own association or organization, museum. So as I'm sure most of you know, it's an online encyclopedia, but it's hosted by a nonprofit called the Wikimedia Foundation. But it's really seems to be the first place that when you search for something in a Google or in any kind of search engine, it will pop up quite quickly and as one of the top 5 or 6 results for you. So, and in that case, it's a very great place to start research, and maybe as a quick check on something as well. It can be, oh, I forgot the name of this. It's something like, or oh, where is this from, or where age and date or something like that. It's a great quick resource to be able to pull that kind of information on, but also as a full oh wait, I need to know more about this and go through. And I know that especially in academia, we are not allowed to use it as the resource that we use for sourcing something, but you can start there. And because everything that goes into an article has to be published source. So it can't just be I'm going to just put this information out there into Wikipedia. It'll be quickly taken out and says you can't source this from something that's been published somewhere to prove it. So we're not going to put it on Wikipedia. So it also, Wikimedia, who hosts it, also hosts other projects. So Wikimedia Commons, MediaWiki, WikiVoyage, Wikiversity. There's a ton of different wiki names, but different projects they do. But a lot of them are all within Creative Commons open licenses and in public domain. So if you go to the next one, Ellen. Thanks. So one of the best things, and I've done a little bit about this, I haven't done it for a while, I will say, but one of the best things to do is become part of Wikipedia, so you can then actively edit and change articles that apply to you, that you know something about. So you can not only just be a reader, you can actually do something. So you can become a Wikipedian. So that way, then you can immediately take action on something if you want to add something more. Because even though we have our websites, we have our social media for our organizations, Wikipedia is a resource that is being used by people. And so therefore, you want to make sure that whatever information that can be out there for yourselves is out there and available. So it's just showing that there's 39 million users that have registered usernames. So that's not even people who go and read articles. Those are people who actually have signed up. And so out of those, you have over 100,000 that are very, very active or active in the last 30 days editing. So all those users can potentially edit articles. But some of the policies which actually help Wikipedia be a better resource for people is that you can't have original research, essentially, which means that you're making claims that can't be sourced. And so that kind of helps then not having false information on an article, in an article. So notability means something warranting an article. So there's guidelines available that show what that means. Whatever you are wanting to write about, is it warranting a whole article or has it already been covered? So, and then conflict of interest, which is something that we have to think about, is if you're writing something about something we really know well, because maybe let's say you work for that museum or you know somebody very well, maybe you're wanting to talk to about somebody in your family. As a person of interest, you can have a conflict of interest. So you have to make sure that you disclose it and still have everything sourced and being able to prove that it's not just claims that you're making. So And then they're saying about if you put anything up, like media, photos, text, and anything, it has to be under their standard license, Wikipedia license, which is a share alike license. So, and they have really great ways to get started. They have, and I've put links, there's links all throughout this PowerPoint, so we'll make sure this is up and available, but there's a very, very easy step-by-step guide on how to start called the Wikipedia Adventure. And I also put another link in there for becoming a Wikipedian. So if we keep going, next. They have something called GLAM, which is specific for its galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. So I have a link here because it has lots of things, so I wasn't going to go through all of it, but that are specific to this sector for being a part and editing on Wikipedia. So it has lots of links of what to do, guidelines, different things, and then also different help boards that then are specific to maybe museums or art or archaeology or history. Okay, next one. Cool. So I realized that Mary is not on the call, but I was going to use her as an example because this is pulled from the North UIST page, and I just wanted to show an example of taking advantage of Wikipedia. So there's the little blurb. It goes through, you know, the history and maybe a bit of like the landscape and geology and different things about North UIST in Scotland. But then it comes to the point of like of modern day, and then mentions this from the museum Tykersiva, but there's nothing under Tykersiva. So there's an opportunity to make an article, because that's notoriety, that would be or notability. So saying that there isn't anything about this, we can write something about this, because museums can have their own pages, of course. So that would be an opportunity to be able to go in. So that's good to check too, if you're interested to go look with your museum as well. Okay, next. Cool. So part of the other projects that Wikimedia Commons has, one of them is called, that would be pertaining to heritage, would be Wiki Voyage, which is kind of a travel guide to places. So it's a sister site to Wikipedia. It's exclusive for sightseeing activities, cuisine, accommodation, so everything that you'd recommend to somebody visiting an area. So I pulled up North UIST again, and it all feeds from Wikipedia as well, but it just kind of like pulls it together more as a guide for sightseeing, so like almost like a little book that you would have. So anything that you put in there then gets pulled in to this as well. And you can volunteer if you're registered, and you can volunteer to become a docent. So if somebody has a question about visiting the area, they can ask the question, and then Wikipedia then throws it back to the docents, if there's any docents for that area, for a specific question. So it's just a volunteer to ask about that. But this is kind of what it looks like a little bit. Okay, next. Cool. So another one that Alan was mentioning a little bit earlier with media would be Wikimedia Commons. So this is a great place to be able to find and use video and photos of anything. So you can search for anything you want, and there should be something on there, a photo that you can use with a different license on it. But it's the same thing that would be great for if you had photos and you wanted to put them up and have them used and distributed. If you go to the next one, I have example, Alan. And then it's getting out there and being shared and used more. So this one, I just searched Scotland, and this is one of the photos that came up. But you can see it has, I didn't fit it quite all in, but it has the person's name, that it was their own work. I think you can link to, go to, if they have a page or something, but it has the license, so you can click and go through to the license using, has a bit of information, and even has GPS locations with it. So I know that if I go through the license, I can check it, but it's share like 4. So I know what that means to then be able to use it if I wanted to use it just for like a PowerPoint presentation, or you know, something else. You know, I know I'll be able to use it. So then the next, go ahead to the next slide, because then that's the just to look at it, it's the share like International 4.0. So it's just really easy to be able to know then what you can do. But I think it's Wikimedia Commons is fabulous for being able to grab stuff, but then also to put stuff up to use. Okay, next one. So another one that applies to us really would be MediaWiki, which MediaWiki is also hosted by the Wikimedia Commons and, I'm sorry, Wikimedia Foundation. But it's basically where you can create your own wiki system. So it's software, you can see it on here, it's software that lets you develop and organize knowledge to be available, but in the structure of a wiki. And it's quite, it's pretty simple to use. And you can add more to it, you can have it super basic. But if you wanted to have it for a project or have it within your own website to kind of like organize a lot of media, that's a good way to use it. But then it's also available for people to edit as well. So it has the same kind of functionalities as Wikipedia does, but it's just for you. So if you go to the next slide, should be an example. Next slide. Yay. So this was part of another project that we've done where we really did use it quite a lot. We probably could have used it even more. But you have different categories and it's a bit of hierarchical how you can put it. So we had museums, collections, objects. So all of those were under. So all these are objects. This is just all of them listed. So these would all be objects that were 3D scanned throughout this project. And there's a lot of them. But anytime we had it linked up to our virtual museum archival system, that anytime there was a new entry made, it created a wiki. So then when the museums were, especially when we were doing workshops, people that were in the workshops could then actually be editing this to be able to curate it just a little bit better for the project as well too. So that's kind of what that looks like. Okay, next. Don't remember what's next. Oh, that was me. But I also have, so the next bit that you can talk to, Alan, is all the resources. There's tons and tons of resources. And we try to include as much as we can. I know that I put up quite a number of, yes, Wikipedia resources to get started that were specifically aimed for the GLAM group, galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. So that should hopefully help and be able to get started on it. But it's quite fun, and you just have to know that it's an active thing. So sometimes if you put something up and you didn't quite have the right permissions to, they might they'll send you a message, say, hey, this isn't quite right, or it's an active thing. And so editing it, and there's whole community involved with it too, so you could make connections with it as well. So I highly recommend it. Yeah, absolutely. Know if you want to say anything about your resources, Alan. Oh.
Sorry. Yeah, no, not really. I think they're useful resources to point to some of the resources that we've used. Sorry, back chat's going on there. Okay, so that's great. Thanks a lot for that, Catherine. I think if I unshare the stop the share, and then we'll be able to see each other again. So that's great. Hello, everybody. It's good to see that you're still all here after us talking about intellectual property, and the Wikipedia stuff was really exciting. I think it's we really do need to make sure Cursor have their entry. Maybe we could all just kind of like, when we have the break, maybe just go and have a look and see if we can find some examples of things that could really do with the Wikipedia entry.
I think it'd be good. Go look at whatever organization, if you're affiliated with it, and go see what the status is, see what it looks like, and if you're happy with it, and then see if there's anything that you can add to it or edit.
I mean, I suppose the thing is that Wiki it seems a bit sort of esoteric, Wikipedia and stuff like that. But the thing to bear in mind is that, like, Google will, if you put in a search, the first thing that it will throw up will be the wiki page for the thing that you search for, pretty much most of the time. And so getting to edit the wiki pages is a way of getting to edit what people are going to see when they do searches in Google and other places. And a lot of organizations would pay a lot of money to have that sort of you know, sort of influence. So I think it's well worth thinking about.
For sure.
You were saying other search engines do that as well, I think.
Yeah, because just personally, I don't use Google as a search engine, but it's the same thing with mine as well.
So,
should we take our break?
Yeah, I think so. But before we do that, just say, you know, I'm here, Catherine's here, and Ian's here, and so is Nicola from Henderson as part of the panel, and I'm sure you'll be happy to answer any questions on
Kay's here too.
Stuff. And, sorry, who?
Kay.
Hi, Kay.
She's hiding down there.
Oh, hi, Kay.
Oh. Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Very good. Good to see you. Good. Well,
I was actually being very quiet because we don't do wiki. I'm learning today.
Oh, great. Hey, that's good.
We've used Wikipedia for exhibitions before and sort of Wikimediathons to get lots of information on where people can come in and get lots of information up and have a bit of fun and engage with the new exhibition there. And there's been a good project on Skye around sort of Women of Skye, where they did it around the 100-year vote anniversary, and to try and address the gender imbalance. They got everybody together to get lots of important women from Skye who are kind of underrepresented up there. So kind of fun.
Nice. It's a great tool, yeah, to use.
And it's great, I think, for museums potentially reaching out to communities, because it lets people be engaged and to write stuff, but also it's, you know, it's quite well understood that a wiki page might not be 100% on the metal all the time, but it's okay for people to come in and make corrections and things like that. So I think that's
absolutely,
that's great. Yeah, let's have the break and come back and discuss this some more. Okay.
Hi, I actually would like to hear a little bit more from, I think it was Skye, about, they said that they did some Wikipedia posts highlighting women. And I'd actually like to hear a bit about that project, because we're thinking of embarking on something similar. We're looking at doing Wikimedia posts for Wiki Women, which feature Caribbean women who are a bit underrepresented at the moment.
Okay, it was a project that was run by Atlas Arts on Skye, and as I say, it was around the anniversary of the 100 years of votes in 2018. And what they did was research some notable women from Skye that were underrepresented in the way their history was told, both on the island and nationally. And so they organised for people to come round and just made a whole kind of, it was 24 hours, I think, and over that time, a different set of people came through, and they had a set of laptops around the table, and they just took time putting as much information as they can that had recognised sources with it. And they got an awful lot of women up there, and then were able to promote that as part of a larger project that was Women of Skye.
Is there a link that we can share, that we can go take a look?
Yeah, do I need to put that on the Facebook page later, James? Is that how I can share links, or? Because we don't have the chat on this.
We can pop it onto the Facebook page afterwards as well, and we'll keep a note of it, and we'll have a resources section for further down the line as well.
Yeah, so I'll make sure I share as much as I can from that, and we'll get it on the Facebook page and in the resources for you.
Thank you.
That's great. That's a good. It's a great example, actually, of being able to use a platform that's there in an innovative way. And do you get quite a lot of people coming on and using the laptops? You get a lot of engagement.
I think just speaking about another Nairn Museum were meant to be having this year an exhibition about women of Nairn, and they were looking to change the way that they presented that exhibition and not have it so information heavy. They often use a lot of panels, a lot of handouts, and they were looking to have it more about the objects, the pictures and the stories. And one way I was discussing with them to kind of help some of those volunteers that really, really like having a lot of that information, a lot of that handout, and people that do like to read more, was looking at kind of Wikimedia around that, or Wikipedia. And again, having that similar kind of session where they come in and they're still having all that information, and you could be pointing people to where they could find out more about these notable people from history without you perhaps needing to have your exhibition too text heavy.
So like having the exhibition with like images and making it quite sort of visual, but
Yeah.
then, you know, people then worry, well, we've got so much to say about this topic. How can we say that? And by putting stuff on Wikipedia, wiki sources, and providing links to those, then people who are inspired by the images can then go and read more about it.
And to make it quite an intergenerational thing as well, because there was some young kids that really knew about it, and some of the older volunteers that weren't as comfortable on the platform, and have them working together, then they were learning about the history and they were learning about the tech and just bringing everybody together.
I think that's one of the things that we've found with just working with pretty much any digital technology is, and I think it's a real shame, you know, because the kids, and by kids I mean, you know, anybody under the age of 30 probably, you know, are so literate in all of these technologies, and yet, you know, in school, obviously younger than 30, but they don't really get, they never really get to use those digital literacies that they've got in kind of like formal learning context, and I think that's one of the things that's so great about sort of informal learning sector, is that there's more, you know, museum stuff, there's a lot more flexibility to be able to introduce new modes of interaction and exploration and so on. I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, in St Andrews we've ended up loving working with museums and heritage organisations. Well, I mean, partly it's because of the raw material and the interest in the history and all of that, but also, you know, there's a natural affinity because of the sort of education function, but there's more freedom. There's more freedom in museums than there is in schools, for sure.
Yeah.
Everyone who goes to a museum is a volunteer, aren't they? There's no
conscripts. We'll try to make you one.
So that's great.
Yeah, the young people are just such digital natives. I see the way my own kids, they don't really get much access to devices yet, but when they do steal your phone or something, they work it out faster than I ever did.
Yeah. But it's that intergenerational thing, isn't it? Because you get, I mean, we've not wanted to be overly stereotypical, but yeah, you know, the kids are into technology, and so that can be a way of getting them into being involved with the heritage, and a lot of the sort of heritage volunteers are at the other end of the age spectrum, and you know, their heart is with the heritage, and so they come to the technology through the heritage, and you get this great sort of intergenerational thing where young people are showing older people, you know, how to do it, and the older people are showing the younger people, you know, about the heritage and explaining to it. And it can be quite magical sometimes, I think. Yeah. Has anyone edited a wiki page? Catherine?
I have. A while ago, I will say. I haven't done it recently. But yeah, I did a few at my first university in undergraduate. I was kind of, I think there was a class or something that they taught us a little bit more of how to do it, and then I kind of ran with it for a little bit. You have to give time. you know, to it. So it's just like, especially as an undergrad student, I had a little chunk of time and then that was gone.
And DJ, did you say that you had done some wiki stuff?
Yeah, I've edited a couple of pages. A similar project that Nicola was talking about in Edinburgh. There's been quite a determined effort by the Wikimedian in residence at Edinburgh University to raise numbers of women on Wikipedia. So I went along for a training session in that, and since then I live out in East Lothian, so I've added one woman to so far. That's all I've managed to do, but I've edited more and tried to increase the numbers of what I find fascinating are the individual categories. So there are women from East Lothian, and I ran the East Lothian Voices Twitter account for a week. So we just tried to increase the numbers of women that people were sending in and trying to make it as collaborative an effort as possible. And it worked. Lots of people brought forth new stories. The hard part is for people to understand that it needs to be cross-referenced with a reliable source. A lot of folk just don't quite get that. So what I'm particularly interested in is how much people are beginning to slowly trust it. There was a lot of snobbery about Wikipedia for a very long time. And slowly but surely, my son's 12, and even during his time at primary school, it's changed. So it's good to see, because as Catherine said, it's a starting point. That's the key. But there is still an element, even in my workplace. I heard somebody was on a Zoom call last week. Someone was talking about, oh, we really shouldn't be using Wikipedia, and then I was trying to explain, well, you can.
Yeah.
That's the starting point.
And it's how you use it, and then using it, you know, to actually do something about it, you know, edit it to then make it better. You know, if you feel like you can add to it because of your knowledge, you know, wealth of knowledge, and then know that you can back it up with sources, it's like, definitely put it in there. And editing doesn't have to mean like scays of words. It can literally be a sentence or a, you know, picture with a subtitle or something. You know, it's not whole entries.
Yeah. In my previous life, I was a publican, and I at different times ran the oldest pubs in Edinburgh, depending on which one I was working in. So that was my first foray into it, and trying not to have that conflict of interest is always difficult.
Right. This one's the best. No, you can't.
Catherine, could you perhaps tell us a little bit more about I was interested, I've not really experienced the media wiki, this side of a collaborative documentation.
Yeah.
How is it used? I mean, is it effectively an online archive then of individual documents? Is that how it grows? Well,
so it can be whatever you want it to be used for. So it can be, so those categories and kind of like the hierarchical structure with it to be searchable, you can structure it that way. For us, when we've used it, it ended up being that way because we've done like, we've been on projects with multiple museums. So then you start with the museums and then filter through to then maybe collections to maybe objects. And then all of those have pages. So all those can be an article. So all those can be updated. But it's encapsulated for your project or for whatever you're doing or yourself. So if you wanted to then have it like for the Sky Women, have it where it's just around a topic and then people can edit and add in just to that specifically, then that can be hosted as part of your website as well. And that's how we've used it is through a project virtual museum, is then you can then go to it and click to it to maybe you find one of the objects on the virtual museum, but then you can go and click to the Wikimedia entry, and then that's been done by, and then that doesn't tie in to Wikipedia, it's just within its own structure. So you can have somebody, you know, write up something, a brief about an object or a museum or whatever, and you can still have references and you can still put things in just like a regular Wikipedia, but it's just for you. And still have it tied with your website or something, but it's kind of like an understanding. And I think it's even maybe in the like in the structure when you put it in, that it's not affiliated with Wikipedia. It is something birthed off of the structure of Wikipedia, and that is open and free to use.
It sounds interesting. I'm going to investigate that now.
Yeah,
I learned something new today.
There you go. It's neat. We've used it, and we've recognized that we've used it, but we didn't fully use it. You know, we've used it a few times. We had it for a project. We've used it in the workshop a few times when people were interested in doing that, depending on who was there, to do entries and to talk about the objects. But we really didn't push it as much as maybe we did other things in the project, just because of where like emphasis ended up lying. But it's a cool idea to then be able to, especially reaching out to the community, to gather information from. Yeah, it's a good source. I don't know, is there anything, Ian, about like creating it that's particularly difficult, or is it like, does it give you pretty step-by-step guides on how to build it?
I mean, they're reasonably simple step-by-step guides. I mean, they're not quite as simple as something like WordPress, but if you're familiar with setting up web applications on a server, it's a relatively easy, straightforward process.
Mm.
Yeah, the virtual museum that comes with the Cupido project that you're all free to sign up for and use. Yeah, whenever something is uploaded into that, you can tick a box, and if you tick the box, it creates a wiki page that you can then edit. So that might be for people, or it might be for places, or it might be for artifacts and the like. But you know, as Catherine says, it's not you're not editing Wikipedia. I mean, so Wikipedia makes the software available for you to use or to reuse. So we've just kind of set that up. So it's associated with this virtual museum, and so anybody can then create whatever they want on that. So you know, because it might be awkward if you're doing a project on something and you know you want to do a wiki page on a particular person or a particular place, and there's one already exists. You know, then you're in a process of kind of like negotiating with if you have your own wiki set up, then you can put in whatever you want with it, and then as Catherine said, link it up with a web page, or you know, share it on social media, or just publicize it in whatever way you want. But it provides a really nice framework for. I'm not sure, Nicola, is that what you did with the Sky people, or did you edit Wikipedia directly?
I didn't directly. It was Atlas Arts that did the project, and I've worked with Atlas Arts before, but I didn't do that specific event. So I'm not sure how they did it, I'm afraid. I think they might have edited directly from what I heard when speaking, but I don't know exactly, sorry.
I can see how that would work, particularly if you're the people that you're putting in are ones that probably aren't already in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's good to have both. There's a time and a place for both both options. But yeah, the one that we've got set up, you're really welcome to use that. You know, if you wanted something that was a bit sort of stand away from the official Wikipedia. There's the Wikidata as well, which is, I mean, it's just worth mentioning because it's a place where you can put data, which can then be accessed by all of the different Wikipedia families and organizations. So by uploading stuff into Wikidata, you make it more sort of generally the intellectual property side of things. Because we found that it can be quite well, you know, when it can get a bit tricky deciding which license to use and in which circumstances, and it's the sort of thing we found in projects that lots of people have different ideas about. I don't know if you have any, what experience you have on that. I mean, quite a lot of organisations have policies about it, so I don't know if anybody has involved in an organisation with a policy. Well, I must admit, from the Wikipedia side, yeah, universities, I think, are maybe at the centre of the snobbery around Wikipedia.
Very true.
But you know, it would be a horrible thought to think that lots of people could get together and sort of create knowledge with the structures of assessment procedures. So, super. So next week is going to be the last in the current series on the Tuesday and it's going to be on virtual museums. But I think that will be a great session. It will kind of like bring together a lot of the things that we've been talking about, and hopefully everything will kind of like fall into place, and that would be great. But we were going to kind of like, as part of that, have a showcase of different virtual museums, and we'll still do that. We'll showcase some really nice examples, I think, both ones that we've been involved with and other ones. But one of the virtual museums that has been most gratifying to be involved with has been the Virtual Museum of Caribbean Migration and Memory with the Barbados Museum and Historical Society. And Monday is the anniversary. Kay, you could probably tell us what number anniversary is. Anyway, it's the anniversary of the Windrush arrival in Britain, and we wanted to really commemorate that. So at 2 o'clock on Monday, we're excited to have an extra session in this series, which is going to be focused upon the anniversary of the Windrush arrival, the contribution of the Windrush generation to Scottish and British society, and also how that kind of fits in with the whole virtual museum context. And I'm really pleased that Kay is going to come along and, well, not actually come along, but it's going to be there to do that. And we'll be able to present the virtual museum. And it's actually part of, there's a lot of things that are happening around the UK and internationally around that, and one of which is that the museum in Reading is having a big thing about the Windrush arrival as well, and later on in the day they're going to be having a radio show and a lot of things that are taking place, and so we'll be linking up with that to an extent. We'll be linking up with that and advertising that as well. So that I think is something to really look forward to.
This is the 72nd anniversary since the arrival of the MV Windrush, I think.
72nd.
The MV Empire Windrush, yeah. Because I think they did the first day to commemorate the 70th anniversary, and I think this is the second, no, 71, because this is the second Windrush celebration day, so 71. Because the first day commemorated the 70th, so 71. So.
That's great for that. And so obviously everybody's invited to come along to that. It's going to be at 2 o'clock, and it's going to be for an hour. It's not going to be for a 2-hour session. It's going to be for an hour, and it will kind of like act as a stand in its own right, Absolutely, 100%. But also it will connect in with the virtual museum thing that we're going to be doing on the Tuesday at 4.